You should all be fired and or put in jail. What you have done is commit fraud on a mass scale.
Hello, everyone. I am Chris Martenson of Peak Prosperity. And you know, I had this really puzzling experience. I bought a house in 2017 in a little town called Greenfield, Massachusetts. And I bought it for $215,000, went through closing, and then I find out that my property was appraised at $270,000. So well, this is wrong because I just paid money for it. So I go down to the assessor's office and I say, hey, here's my proof. I paid $215,000. That's its actual market value. And they said, oh, Chris, you can't do that. You'll have to go through an appeals process, which I did, and I lost because there was some very complicated appraisal formula that I was running afoul of. I didn't get it, didn't feel right. Well, it's not only just not right, it is massive fraud that's been going on. I'm not sure in that particular case, but boy, we're going to talk about massive fraud going on in real estate taxes. Everybody who owns a house should care about this program. Today, we're talking with Mitch Vexler. Mitch, welcome to the program. I can't wait to get into this with you.
I'm honored to be here, and thank you for asking me to appear.
So I met you at Limitless Expo, and we were there together, and I just got a little taste of it, and then you sent me a lot of documents. I want to get into this, but is it wrong for me to suspect that something was broken with a process where my appraised value of my house was more than I actually paid for it?
Based on the evidence we've come up with, no, not at all. You were right. They were wrong. They committed fraud, and it's happening across the United States. We now have at least one person from 47 different states that have confirmed exactly what it is that you're saying. So it's not just in the single family, but it's also in the commercial properties as well. But the single family, mom and pop cannot possibly understand what's going on here, because the depth of this issue is literally like an onion that's got 1,000 layers. But every layer you peel back, you just want to cry more because it's more and more fraud. So it's compound, cumulative fraud.
Now, let's get the sweep of this, because the way it's supposed to work, listen, we're all good tax-paying citizens. We like things like roads and schools and public facilities, I guess, is the idea. And so the idea is that we have local governance. They're voted into office. They pass a budget, right, that people ostensibly have some say in. And then they have to decide how they're going to collect that revenue for that. And then they would do that, I guess. You described to me, standing out in the hall after the talk I gave there, a different process, which kind of sounded like they just tell the number that they want, and the appraisers say, oh, well, we can get you that number. We'll just jack up real estate values until we get you the tax revenues you need. Did I miss that, or did I hear that right?
No, you heard it right. So what's happening, which is in violation of the law and how it is supposed to happen. So if we back up for 1 second, what's supposed to happen is that a database is created inside the Central Appraisal District, which we call CADS. Doesn't matter where it is, Denton Central Appraisal District or Massachusetts, it doesn't matter. So they have a database. It is supposed to have actual information in it based on what is called USPAP, Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice. It is supposed to adhere to the Texas State Property Tax Code, and it is supposed to adhere to the Texas Constitution. Now, in every other state, it would adhere to that state tax code, property tax code, and that state constitution. Doesn't matter that it's Texas. It just happens to be that in Denton Central Appraisal District, we have all the irrefutable evidence. Now, so what are they really doing? Well, they completely ignore USPAP, which is the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice that all appraisers are supposed to abide by, as well as all central appraisal districts. They ignore their state property tax code, and they ignore their own constitutions. That's happening everywhere. In favor of, well, we go, chief appraiser goes, and he has lunch with the state comptroller, and the state comptroller says, well, we have what's called a property valuation study. Go, and here's our budget. We need to move money from this district to this district. Go and increase the property values. Right on the spot, that's a violation, but that's the state comptroller and the chief appraiser doing that. But it gets worse. The taxing entities own the Central Appraisal District. Who are the taxing entities? Just like you were saying, it's the municipalities, it's the school districts, it's those who allegedly create the efficient budget from which roads and schools, et cetera, are operated. The problem is that the taxing entities, such as the school districts, will go to the chief appraiser and do the exact same thing that the state comptroller did, which is, here's our budget. Hit it. There's simply no way that mom and pop can compete with this. The values aren't real. In fact, the values are pumped up in excess of 40% to meet predetermined budgets that had nothing to do with discovery of market value or any valuation in law. In other words, the appraisal districts are not doing an appraisal under any definition of law.
You know, I actually had this exact argument in the last town I lived in where, for whatever reason, our local school district, they need 5-6% a year. I don't know why, but it's always, their budget's always 5 or 6% higher. And I went in and I said, hey, wages are only increasing nationally at about 2.5-3%. So we have a math problem on our hands, which is called compounding, right? Where if the needs, if the expenses are compounding at 5 or 6%, but the income is only compounding at 2% or half that, say, sooner or later, you have a math problem, which is just you're broke, you're insolvent. I guess bankruptcy is the legal proceeding that follows, but you're insolvent because you're starting to exceed the, well, you know, what is insolvency? It's when your liabilities exceed your assets, right? What is a bubble? It's when incomes can no longer sustain the expenses required by that enterprise. This sounds like a math problem to me.
No, this sounds like a fraud problem, because in reality, they don't give a damn about the math because they're completely ignoring USPAP, which is about being quantifiable. USPAP is about being objective. And we have reverse engineered USPAP. There's nothing wrong with USPAP as long as you adhere to it. The problem is it's not being adhered to. So it's not really a math problem, it's a theft problem. Because what's really going on under the hood,
yeah.
The school districts, you know, to your point. So the school districts, are bankrupt today because we already have evidence just within the last 2 weeks that in the case of the Tarrant Appraisal District, that's Fort Worth, they tried to freeze. The Tarrant Appraisal District was making a move to freeze the taxes. The school districts showed up in mass to say, you cannot freeze them. You must continue to raise them annually. And if you do not, we are bankrupt. At which point I chimed in and said, you idiots are bankrupt today, never mind what you're trying to do in the bonds tomorrow. So the real issue for these school districts, and to get back to your point, it's the bonds. See, we haven't found in the case of Louisville Independent School District in the last 3 years a single bond that has been paid off. Well, if you go back in time 3 years ago, you had money at 2 7/8. Today, let's call it 7 7/8, 8% cost of capital. So these people, A, didn't pay off the bonds. B, they're not paying them off. C, they're rolling up the bonds and they're rolling out on the interest. In other words, the cumulative compound effect is the exact reverse of what an amortization schedule should be. Like mom and pop have an amortization schedule, you pay off your house in 30 years, give or take 25, whatever. But it's the exact reverse for these school districts. They're cumulatively compounding the problem, and that's why they keep saying, well, you have to give us more money annually. No, we don't have to give you anything annually. You should all be fired and or put in jail. What you have done is commit fraud on a mass scale, and you do not have the cover to allow you to do it. There's no law to cover them.
And now a word from our sponsor. Hey, that's me. I'm Chris Martenson, also CEO of Peak Financial Investing, where you can find a financial advisor who sees the world the way you do. Listen, this is super important right now. There's risks everywhere, as we're just seeing in this presentation with Mitch Wexler. There's a muni bond risk out there. We know that the United States government is overspending like crazy, so there's an exploding deficit and a resulting debt problem for the United States government. We know that the stock market has been held up and has been overextended due to all kinds of monetary printing. Listen, it's time to consider the risks and make sure that your portfolio is managed by somebody who both understands those risks and sees the world the way you do. So we work really hard to find financial advisors who just tick every box for who we want to work with. And ultimately, these people become our good friends. We trust them. And it's really important that you pick a financial advisor who's working with and for your interests. So with that, please come by peakfinancialinvesting.com. Fill out a very simple form if you want, and you will be contacted by one of our financial advisors to begin the process of figuring out if it's a good fit for you. But please, whatever you do, take this information seriously and make sure that you have a deep and no holds barred conversation with your financial advisor about the information contained in this podcast. With that, now back to our regular program. So with fraud, that means some kind of a law is being broken. Maybe I could turn to this quickly then. This is from the documents you sent, and here a variety of bullet points, but help us understand. I want to get to that top sentence up there, but I think that second piece in yellow that I've highlighted there. So first off, what is a DCAD? But you're saying here that they claim the average market value of a home is $514,000. You say this is a lie. Why? Because the median income is $109,000 and monthly housing costs on $514,000 far exceed the 28% lending ratio test, which is hopefully you can explain that for us. And in fact, $109,000 income can only afford a home valued at $296,000 or below. And in 2023, over 72% of Denton County in Texas households cannot afford the $514,000 value determined by DCAD, which on its face value means DCAD is lying. Help us understand that. What are we looking at here?
Well, so Mr. Don Spencer, who's the chief appraiser for Denton Central Appraisal District, stood in front of the board and in the press. Okay, that's public. And when you do that, you're under threat of perjury. He stood in front of the public and said, the average value of a house is $514,000 in Denton Central Appraisal District. That is a straight up lie, because if the median household income is $109,000, which can only afford a $296,000 home, so that's one problem. But it gets worse in that you have the 28% value to income, which is what is generally required under Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae, et cetera. So he violated that issue. They don't even pay attention to that. They don't even care what the lending requirements are. But the underlying point of this is, how can Mr. Spencer say that it's a $514,000 average home when 70% of your population can't afford it? On its face, it's fraud. On its face, he committed perjury.
Wouldn't he say that most of these people actually bought their homes when they were a lot cheaper and now they're valued at that? But that's not what they're on the hook for in terms of a mortgage payment. Is that the argument they're going to make?
No, there is no argument that they can make, because all the stats and numbers that we have, the base stats, are their numbers. We just simply broke it down using statistical analysis. So what we did is we tied USPAP, Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice, to the math. Right? We reverse engineered it. We created what is supposed to be inside of their own computer systems and their own databases. Then we tied that to the Texas Property Tax Code. Then we tied that to the Texas Constitution. Then we tied that to the U.S. Constitution. So what they're supposed to be adhering to is completely irrelevant to them, because the only thing they're doing is meeting a predetermined budget.
Now, you've torn this apart for Denton County. How many places do you think operate like this?
Right now, we have at least one person from 47 different states. We're getting emails in by the hour. We're getting what I would call hard evidence probably every 4 hours. So many people can't quite articulate it. They don't have the evidence. They don't have what it is that you would have if you went to go and protest. They're complaining, which is fine. And we're saying, if you've got the evidence, please fork it over. So, but this is not just a Texas problem. This is now, it's gone parabolic, because the debt has gone parabolic. So they don't care that they're lying. They're literally at the point we have to keep lying in order to keep the fraud going. And the only thing that's holding this economy together, in truth, is fraud.
Well, and some self-delusion, I guess. This is a chart I show a lot, which is at the national level, this is debt on the top. So this is all debt, not unfunded liabilities. This doesn't include, what we owe potentially for Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. Just debt. State, municipal, local, federal, corporate, you name it, just debt. And that's the top line. And below that is the GDP. That would be the equivalent of the household income that you're talking about. The United States is now over $100 trillion. There's only $315 trillion in the last BIS report globally. So the United States is roughly 30% of the total debt level, and we're about 4% of the population in the world, maybe 5% if we round up. Seems like a problem to me. And the problem is that I've done my usual amazing artistry and continued in purple. What the story is. That's what we're supposed to believe in. It sounds like you're telling me this same story, but now it's at a fractal level. Now this is happening with property taxes, and this is just the system we have at this point. It's a runaway system that's kind of looks like a train wreck from here.
The two charts are absolutely identical. So in Denton Central Appraisal District between 2017 and 2023, they overinflated anything way above whatever USPAP would require, overinflated by $67 billion. That is the net result of theft of $1.34 billion, over and above what should normally be paid. That is the equivalent of a 40% overcharge. Now, I ran some math a couple days ago, just kind of out of curiosity. So Denton Central Appraisal District is $67 billion overcharged, overvalued. Well, there's 3,143 appraisal districts in the United States. If you simply said, for the sake of fun and conversation, each one went up $1.5 billion in 1 year, that is a net result of almost $1 trillion being stolen from the taxpayers, anybody that owns real estate in the United States. Just short of $1 trillion in straight up fraud.
Well, this probably starts to explain why, somebody that I like to follow is Ed Butowski. He runs something called the Chapwood Index, looking for inflation. And he has to rerun inflation because the government, the way it does it with its CPI, it's very fraudulent as well and deceptive. But it misses three big things that it doesn't count. One of them is property taxes. It doesn't count that in the CPI inflation. It has something called owner equivalent rent, which is supposed to be a catch-all thing, but it's a very bizarre term. And anyway, it just feels like statistical shenanigans, this and that. Now, this story feels the same to me. It feels like governments find ways to sort of game the system, but you keep using words like fraud and crime. What laws have been broken here? And you say you can run this up and down the court system. What are they violating here? What's the kind of laws we're talking about?
We have a 10-page document that literally outlines every single law that they're violating, but it's not just municipal law. So people who signed an oath, that's where we can start. The chief appraiser signed an oath. The board of directors signed an oath. This is an oath of office. And in that oath, it clearly says to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States of America and the state of Texas. If you violate USPAP, which is a requirement inside of the Texas Property Tax Code, you violate 2301B and 2301E that says you will adhere. It's not an option. It's not at a discretion. You will adhere to the Texas Property Tax Code. The Texas Constitution itself requires uniform and equal. It is not at anybody's discretion to ignore it. You signed an oath, okay? Violation of that oath at a minimum is a third-degree felony. And it gets worse from there because not in federal law, as well as Texas Penal Code, when you're told that you're violating the law, which I have told them in writing multiple times, and complaints have been filed with the Texas State Comptroller, not just by me, but also by a whistleblower who used to work. She was the mole at Denton Central Appraisal District for 6 years. She went onto the ARB panel because she knew that crimes were being committed. She's a true definition. She's the real thing. She filed with the State Comptroller. We haven't heard anything but crickets. We get a memo every once in a while that says, well, we don't have the right to enforce. They put that in writing. This is a State Comptroller. Okay, the State Comptroller is in charge of doing audits on these central appraisal districts. Please explain how you don't have the right to enforce, Mr. Hagar. And to that point, just recently, I even told Mr. Hagar, look, I believe in the First Amendment. Let's sit down. I'll give you 15 people on your side of the table. Bring your attorneys, load them up, bring members, anybody you want, the best orators you've got. Come and sit with me. We'll have a debate. We'll do it at a public stadium. We'll find some place that's got 7,000 seats, and we'll just sit and talk it through. I'll buy the cappuccinos. 3 weeks ago, I did the same thing with Mr. Don Spencer at Denton Central Appraisal District. I'm sincere. Let's talk it through. Now, they won't because they obviously know that they're guilty. I mean, this isn't a question of not being guilty. You're caught. It's your numbers. We have you on audio tape. So Mr. Don Spencer said, this is back last year, well, we took 60,000 properties out of the database and manipulated them, his words, in Excel and put them back. We've got it on tape. That's under threat of perjury. A couple of weeks after that, the board of directors, a fellow's name is Charles Stafford. So he's doing whatever he's doing. He says to Mr. Spencer, again on tape, Mr. Spencer, you and your team are the masters at guessing. There is no debate here. You're caught. The only question is, do you go to jail or do we end up suing you to bankrupt you? Well, yet to be determined, but we're working on it.
Well, I want to talk about those remedies in a second, but you're saying they took 60,000 homes out and parked it and just manipulated them. Did what to them? What happened when they took them out of that database and put them back?
Well, it's a bit of a backstory there. So in 2016, when I recognized that there was a problem, we didn't know the depth of it. So I told my attorney at that time, who also happens to be an accountant, he's a litigator and an accountant, I said, Matt, there's a wizard behind the screen doing this. There's no computer system on this planet that can come up with this amount of selectivity and get these numbers. This just can't be done. Well, it took all these years to figure it out because it was Don Spencer's own testimony on that 60,000. The person that did it was Rebecca Townsend. The second my accountant found out about that statement, and I called Matt and I said, okay, the wizard behind the screen is Rebecca Townsend. She works directly for Don Spencer. There's your proof. And oh, one other thing, it's on tape.
But they take these, again, I'm flabbergasted because I know this isn't technically written in anywhere, but this whole idea of taxation without representation is a no-no, at least in spirit. I don't know if that's in the letter of the law. But I do have this idea that there are remedies and that I have rights and that there are guardrails in the system. You're describing a completely guardrail-less system where people are just making up valuations because it fits whatever political expediency. Maybe they have to make budget. Maybe they feel like this district needs a little and that one's got a little too much. It sounds capricious and arbitrary and bizarre. What am I missing here?
Nothing. It is capricious. It is arbitrary. It is criminal, but it gets worse. So Don Spencer's testimony, and that 60,000 is really interesting to a guy like me. I happen to have something called an infection rate spreadsheet, and that shows how fast a disease will move through a community. Well, I plugged in the math at 60,000 because what that really is they take comps, comparisons. So if you go into your ARB or appraisal review board, and you'll find that there's probably 6 comparisons, 2 of which are not even comparisons. So they're trying to even commit fraud on that issue. But the problem is, if you go back to 2016 and you say 6 properties, 2 are bad, but they keep those 2 in the database, 2 are bad, then they use those 2 against other properties. You're right back to the word cumulative compounding. They're cumulatively compounding the fraud. Well, on that 76% issue, so what happens is the database, by cumulatively compounding comparisons that aren't even comparisons, and Don Spencer's testimony, that's 60,000, the net result is that the database, just based on the 60,000 amount of properties that were modified, 76% corrupt data in their databases. Now, let's assume that Don Spencer lied. Pretty safe bet. Just for the sake of conversation, let's take it to 80,000. That 80,000, even though it's not that much of a jump, but that 80,000 turns into 92% corrupt data. Their databases literally aren't worth 10 cents. They are irretrievably corrupt. You cannot go back and reverse engineer this. There's no way to do it. You literally have to start from scratch. And every time they say, well, we're going to look at this market value or that market value, the market values aren't even real because they're not adhering to USPAP. So there's no place to go other than the complete elimination of the property taxes because you can't fix this. They've stolen so much money, their databases are irretrievably corrupted, and the people that are doing this are simply making their living on the backs of the theft that they've created from the taxpayer.
As I understand it, this whole idea of how you appraise properties is supposed to be fairly buttoned up here. So you sent me a couple of things. First, the mathematics of real estate appraisal. This is just the front page. It's a very long document. This is in 2004. But what caught me, one of the documents you sent was Fannie Mae. right? And they say B4104, unacceptable appraisal practices. There are a lot of things in there. But down there, I highlighted in yellow, I think, what you're talking about. Bullet point, selection and use of inappropriate comparable sales. Bullet point, failure to use comparable sales that are the most locationally and physically similar to the subject property. And in my case, the story I told, I couldn't even use my own comp sale as a value measure. They had a different system. Another bullet point, creation of comparable sales by combining vacant land sales with the contract purchase price of a home. That has been, and that sentence is cut off. Also, not supporting adjustments in the sale comparison approach and failure to make adjustments when they are clearly indicated. Failure to make adjustments when they're clearly indicated. That's an unacceptable appraisal practice. Now, this is Fannie Mae, so this is presumably on the buy side of the story, but it would probably be, I would have to assume, they don't have different appraisal processes for tax purposes, do they?
No. So it gets worse. Jeremy Bagot is a proverbial 1,600-pound gorilla in the appraisal world. He did a video a couple weeks ago outlining the fact that Fannie, Freddie, and HUD are requiring the appraisers to commit fraud to hit the target. If you don't hit the target value, you will A, lose this job, B, you will never get another job. Okay? When I say this is polluted all the way up the chain, it is polluted all the way up the chain.
Wow. This is massive, Mitch. I mean, this is just like, if you feel like you're a tax donkey, you kind of are. But yeah. This just sounds like an entire ecosystem that has gotten so monstrous. It doesn't even seem to care about whether it's breaking laws, following laws, or within the guardrails of the laws. It sounds rogue at this stage.
This is purely rogue, and this is not fixable. This is irretrievably corrupt. And this is one of the reasons why I said that one method out of this mess is you can use the infrastructure of a sales tax. It's there. It needs a little bit of polishing. But if you eliminate property tax, because the property tax is purely at this point totally subjective. It's not objective anymore. It's broken. It's irretrievable. Well, a sales tax is objective. And a national sales tax, where the states can simply look at how much money do we really need, it won't be that bad of a blunt in terms of the increase of the sales taxes on everybody. But look at the amount of fat in the system you would be eliminating, right? There's no longer a tax on real estate. All these people that are in truth at this moment criminals by virtue of what they're doing, some people may not know it, but the people at the CADs, they absolutely know it. We've been all over them. There's no way you could not know. There's been over 80 articles written in the press in the last 4 years. You cannot know and say, well, we didn't know. A. B, ignorance of the law isn't an excuse. C, you got a license from TDLR, Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation, that you're supposed to adhere to USPAP. And clearly, every stitch of evidence that we have says you don't. And then that one sentence from Ken Paxton himself, where he literally says, if the law, if you're a rogue operation, you must be enjoined. And that's federal law. And Ken Paxton sent that to the Supreme Court in December of 2023. Well, what do you call these central appraisal districts?
Yeah, what do you say here? Quote, a reviewing court shall hold unlawful and set aside agency action finding and conclusions found to be arbitrary, capricious, there's where I got that word from, in abuse of discretion or otherwise not in accordance with the law. That's by Attorney General Ken Paxton out of Texas, obviously. So, and you said enjoined. That's legal speak for what?
Shut it down. It's that simple. These operations are straight up criminal at this point. You know, were they created originally with that thought? Probably not. But the reality is, all the evidence that we've got since 2016, and it's gigabytes. We literally have gigabytes of data on our system, breaking all of this apart. And it's clearly a criminal conspiracy to defraud. And nobody can say otherwise, because you can't disprove any of our information. The beauty of it is, it's their numbers. We just broke it apart and tied it all together.
Now, if we could fix this, this would be a big thing. I mean, I live in a small town in western Massachusetts, and I mean, one of the big things is we've got a fairly high property tax rate on a mill basis, and the problem is that old people are literally getting taxed out of their homes. Like the tax increases, they just can't keep up with inflation plus, you know, how their fixed incomes aren't sort of dialing up in accordance with that, et cetera. So the idea that we would tax, this really bothers me a lot, that we would take a 65, 70-year-old person who's paid their way into this system, dutifully been a good steward of everything, and then we're like, sorry, it looks like you can't afford your property taxes. You're going to have to leave that home you lived in your whole life. This is immoral to me. This is really disgusting that we live that way.
I mean to ruffle your feathers, but watch this one. So we have an elderly gentleman who is a vet in Ohio. He's 84 years old. He bought his house for $24,000. This year is being commanded to pay $3,100 off of a fixed income that he doesn't have. And my point is, human beings are doing this to other human beings. This is disgusting. They need to be put in jail, the people that are doing this. You want to stop it? Put them in jail. See, you can sue them, you can bankrupt them. So in my own mind, I'm wrestling with this issue right now. But the truth of the matter is they belong in jail because of all the laws that they've broken. What are you trying to do to this guy? You're going to put him inside of a seniors housing complex that's going to cost $80,000 a year, and he doesn't need it.
Hello, everyone. I want to interrupt this program briefly just to remind Peak Prosperity subscribers, which I hope you'll consider becoming one, that there is a part 2 to this where we're going to be talking about all of this information here, the impact on municipal bonds, why I think there's an energy shock coming that will kind of make inflation follow a 1970-style course, which is not a good thing. That's called stagflation. We're just one energy shock away from almost repeating the 70s, only this time with extra leverage. We have a lot of debt in the system. We got to talk about that. And as well, we're going to have to talk about ways that we can begin preparing for this. Look, all of us need to understand the actual risks that are going on. That's what I do for subscribers at Peak Prosperity for, really, it's a huge value. A little less than $1 a day. You get access to me. I will be your information scout. I will scour the world. I'll find you the best data and information. And you can trust that at a minimum, I'm going to do my level best at that. I can't always guarantee that there's good news to be had out there because, well, the news is getting kind of choppy, and you know that. The question is, what do you do with that? And so in order to help get you there, well, I have a way. My Martinson method, as it were. And at least part of that is providing framing to simplify a very complicated world, to make sure we're looking at signal, not noise, and also information without action. Well, that's just annoying, vexing, or otherwise cluttering up your mind. So we're always talking about ways to take what we're seeing in the world and moving that to positive, constructive action. The future, hey, it's going to be full of the usual cast of characters, winners and losers. There might be a few more losers this time because of how the things are stacked up. But trust me, there will always be winners. And these are going to be the people who have access to actionable information. And I want you to be among them. And now, back to our program. So this is rogue at this point in time. So let's talk about what are the remedies that can be done. You've mentioned the word suit a number of times. I'm a little lawsuit averse because lawyers are very expensive. But let's just say I want to go up against my local assessor's board. What's the process?
So believe it or not, we're in the process of creating something that is generic across the United States because of this problem, to help mom and pop. And the fellow who's putting it together, his name is Travis Spencer with The Real Estate Mindset. So he's done a series of videos on this, but he's the right guy to do this because he actually was a mortgage broker and he quit when he saw the fraud. So he reached out to me about 3 weeks ago. So we're really pushing because I've never been on social media up until 3 weeks ago. Didn't know anything about it. Well, through this process, just like this vet out of Ohio, we figured out, okay, people can't fight this. They don't even know how to go to an ARB hearing. And so we're in the process now. I did a short little clip, like 2 minutes on one of these videos yesterday, telling people how you deal with an ARB review board. Don't get mad. Don't get frustrated. We're going to give you the ability to go and find your own comparisons. There is no law that allows a central appraisal district to pick the comparisons. They just do it. If you walk in with true comparisons, and we'll show you how to set those up from within your neighborhood, those are the comparisons. Now, it doesn't mean you're going to win because of the high likelihood they'll keep committing fraud. However, that would now set you up Not that you want to go individually, because a person with a house necessarily cannot afford a lawsuit. However, if you have 4 or 5 other people in your neighborhood in the exact same bucket, okay, now there's power in numbers. Now you can afford a lawsuit. So all of you can sign on to the lawsuit, and all of you can go after that central appraisal district, and all of you can go after the individuals on the ARB panels. You can go after the RPAs, the registered property advisors, because they're the ones that are committing perjury and lying to the panels. You can go after the chief appraiser, because that's what the law says. Chief appraiser is the main person responsible in law. So there are people you can go after, but it just takes, in the case of mom and pop, 4 or 5 people to join forces. 4 or 5 people become the plaintiff against all those members that I just listed. So now, there are ways, and we're working on it.
So thank you for that. And pardon my ignorance. These people, these entities you just named, is that going up against City Hall, or are these contracted private firms who are operating outside of the law?
Okay, that's actually a pretty good question. So the reason why is because the Appraisal Review Board is supposed to be independent of the Central Appraisal District. Bit of a problem. That ARB is in fact paid for and scheduled by the Central Appraisal District. So, you see, the more people that file these protests and take it all the way through the ARB, shockingly, if 40% of the population went and protested and took it all the way through, there's a very high probability you would bankrupt your CAD. They don't have the manpower. They don't have the money. So let's use Denton Central Appraisal District. They average about 508 lawsuits. That's past the ARB. The people didn't like it at the ARB, then they file lawsuits. So they average 508 a year. Well, if you double that, that's another method to bankrupt the CAD. So over and above the fact that these people are criminal and should be thrown in jail, well, we can break it down and start looking at methods to bankrupt these central appraisal districts. The more people that protest, wonderful. You just got to get it up to a certain number. So if the protests are 7,000, you take the 7,000 that are normal in that community, you take it to 12,000, okay, they're broke. Double the lawsuits, broke. And then, of course, you can file your complaints and everything else with your state comptroller, just like we're doing. But this system has got to go.
It has to go. But so what's the response you've gotten so far? Since I think you've just sort of, this is just sort of coming out as a story now. Happy to be on the front end of this because this is a big story. What's the response been so far?
Well,
official and say from the public. Let's break it into 2 buckets.
Since the time that I met you, I think I've gotten about 4 hours of sleep. Because every time I answer an email, 3 more come in. So, and I have to go through them because it's important in that I'm looking for the evidence. I want the stories. Yes, that's true. And I want people to sign the petition. Yeah, that's true. But the more evidence we get, I believe that in my particular case, we're headed for the Supreme Court. I believe that if the state of Texas keeps punting these cases, which is what happened on the first one, but we're now in front of the appellate court, we're going to win there, so it'll be okay. But the point of the matter is, this is so badly broken that under the 16th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, you cannot charge a tax on unrealized gains, okay? Market value is, in fact, an unrealized gain. Now, they're going to say, well, but we're a state and we can do this and we can do that. Say whatever you want. No problem, because I've still got you on the 5th, 14th, 11th, and First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. Which one of these would you like to argue about? There's simply no way out because we've got all their documents. We literally have their certified tax rules. We have evidence. So Judge Eads is a county commissioner. He's in this up to his eyeballs. Well, he is the county commissioner. One of the taxing entities happens to be a mayor of Lakewood Village, and he happens to be a forensic accountant. We've got this on tape. He stood in front of Judge Eads and Michelle French, the tax assessor collector, and yelled at them that the entirety of that year's numbers are fraudulent. Well, Michelle French received a falsified tax roll certification. It was known to be false. Why? Because our mole found it. That's part of our lawsuit. That's documented. This isn't up for debate. It's documented. when you start stacking all these problems, you realize this is a true criminal conspiracy to defraud. They can't get out of it. Over and above that, the attorney, opposing counsel, when we went to the first court hearing, the very first one, so about 50 days ago now, he stands in front of the judge. This is the opposing counsel. And we have it on tape, right? Your Honor, this is how you and I make our living. I'm going to hang that around his neck. But you see, that's the truth. He wasn't lying.
Mm-hmm.
He's an idiot for saying it, but he wasn't lying. But that's what they're doing to mom and pop. They're literally stealing your money. They've engineered it in such a way that A, it's illegal, B, it's financially bankrupt, C, they engineered that money out of your pocket, roughly 40% of your property valuation, straight into theirs. And these school districts are bankrupt. It's over. So that chart that you showed on the debt load, that is the exact same chart. Smaller district, but it's the exact same parabolic line.
Houston, we have a math problem. It just seems so obvious. And so, if I was going to be gracious at all, I would say, look, systems just get bad over time, right? I was going to use a more colorful term, but they sort of like lose their way, and it happens, right? Sometimes you just have to burn the company down and start over, right? When you're looking at, rescuing a company that's in deep trouble. It sounds like what we have here is a system that's just sort of grown this way and nobody's really looked at it, but they haven't had a challenge in a long time. So thank you for bringing the challenge. And now that they have the challenge, I'm just wondering how they're going to respond, because I bet you anything they're going to say an equivalent of what that lawyer said to the judge, which is, yeah, but this is how the system works. Right or wrong, if we break this, we break municipal financing, we break municipal bonds, right? And by the way, right after you and I talked, I literally went up to everybody I knew. I was like, I need you to reconsider your muni bond portfolios stat, because what you're describing is basically I'm going to use the term, it's an insolvent system at this stage, and it's unfixably insolvent. Can't be fixed.
Yes, 100%. And the bonds are going to blow to shreds. What are the bonds really worth? These school districts are bankrupt. They only have one asset. It's not the buildings. It's not the land. All that stuff is levered to the nth degree. They take $1 million. So refer to Louisville Independent School District just for sake of conversation. That $1 million gets levered 20 to 1. They go out and waste all sorts of money. There's a school district in Texas called Itasca. Do you know that Itasca School District backstopped 2 developers on 2 2,000-acre solar fields with no guarantee of return of principal and no guarantee of return on investment?
Wait. School district is backing a solar development? Walk me through that. Two of them. What? I don't even understand that.
Yeah.
Strange language.
So the state comptroller has what's called a 313 agreement, which has been around for a long time. They use it in oil fields and that kind of thing. The problem here is that some idiot somewhere, we'll get the school district to back this. First of all, if you're a developer, get your own equity. Second of all, there's no law that allows a school district to take unilateral bets. Even the state comptroller cannot take a unilateral bet to backstop some green idea that isn't going to work to begin with, because the cost in order to make that green idea work requires all sorts of subsidies. What the hell are you doing? By the way, this school district, okay, the value of these guarantees, for lack of a better word, give or take, is around 500 million, somewhere in that vicinity. The school district is worth $8 million on their own balance sheet. That's it. Yeah.
How do they backstop that? I don't even understand what I'm hearing. This is a bizarre.
If the FBI was awake, they would literally move a field office and start arresting everybody that's touched this. That's how bad that is in the school district. This is just straight up. To me, and I have no proof of this at this point, but this is a kickback scheme. I mean, this thing stinks to high heaven. Somebody's getting money somewhere to allow this to go through. Yep.
And then the ultimate, who's really on the hook, of course, is the people who live in that community, obviously.
It's not a wealthy community. It's a very, if I'm not mistaken, the median household income there is only $85,000. This is not big money. This is why the school district is relatively small. But it proves my point. Like, what the hell did you just do? You just levered up 600 to 1. Are you crazy? Right? There's no guarantee of return of money. There's no guarantee of return on money. So somebody somewhere is getting paid. But you kind of get my point. When you have these school districts that are doing these things, Louisville Independent School District, levered to the eyeballs, right? They got bonds. I actually read one of their bonds. They underwrote the bond, 267 pages. In 267 pages, it literally says, I know nothing, I saw nothing, I heard nothing, give us the money and good luck to you. That's all it says.
267 pages. Now, call me old-fashioned, but I just don't think that a local school district should be in recourse debt financing dodgy projects that have nothing to do with education. But maybe that's just me.
They have one job to do. The job is to educate the children, nothing else past that. When they show up at the Tarrant Appraisal District, as they did just last week, there's 13 or 15 of them. They were lined up like jets on a runway, taking shots one after another. You have to increase the property values or we are bankrupt. That tells you right on the spot, no, you're bankrupt today, right? Mm-hmm. You can't keep increasing values because mom and pop can't pay it. The money isn't there to pay it. When you've got a parabolic line straight up, how are you going to get that money? 37% of your population right now today, your household population, that's multifamily and single family, are bankrupt and or they are going to lose the roof over their head. So my point to all of this is, if you're trying to start a civil war, you're well on your way because you're going to make people desperate. And when people become desperate, they're going to do desperate things. If you have a brain cell, there is a fix. It'll be painful, but at least we're in front of the market. When the market wakes up, those bondholders, to your point, when they wake up and they see what's going on here, they'll sue everybody in sight. It doesn't matter who you are. Now, they're not going to win against a school district because the school district doesn't have the money. That doesn't mean they won't sue them. That doesn't mean they won't climb up the chain all the way to the state comptroller's office. And they've got big pockets. And they will be really pissed.
Now, I'm of an age where I remember elementary schools, this brick building, nothing fancy. We had a room, second grade, Mrs. Taylor. Remember the whole thing, right? Desks, that was the whole thing. So in that little town of Greenfield, Mass, they just had put out this big bond thing, and they needed a new high school. You need one because the last one was like 40 years old, so you just tear them down because they're disposable. So I said, okay, well that means that this thing has to have we just shouldn't plan on a bigger lifespan because they build them kind of the same, flat roofs and other things. $60 million was the cost. And I calculated it out. That was around $750 a square foot, right? And I'm just like, what is this? The Taj Mahal? I didn't understand what I was looking at, right? And apparently that's just what it costs. But what you're telling me is that's just what it costs because there's too many hands in the pockets. This is the machine. The machine has figured out how to get everybody paid out from the contractors on through. There's not a chance in the world that building is going to amortize out at $60 million on this little. When I say Greenfield is a city, 21,000 people, right? Median household income way below those numbers you're talking about. Not a wealthy place. How do you afford a $60 million high school? I don't get it.
You're right back to the same issue. Somebody's getting paid off. So it could be in the mechanical engineering department. It can be in any one of a dozen places. Well, give me the contract. I'll kick you back some money. Remember, I'm a builder. I've seen this before, right? Mm-hmm. Well, give me the contract and I'll give you some cash, at which point we throw them out the nearest window. But that's not unusual when you're dealing with people that A, do not know how to bid a project out, B, are really in it for the perception of their alleged power, C, are in a position to accept a kickback. So when I say it's polluted up the chain, here you go. It is not justifiable.
All right. Well, let's take it mom and pop. I mean, what realistically can they do at this stage? I mean, if your municipality's already put that water under the bridge, it just sounds like I don't know how you get out. I mean, honestly, I have a long list of things people say, hey, Chris, where would you move and why? And I have reasons for, resilience, but it sounds like, looking at the local taxing authority bond, water under the bridge, out the door kind of stuff, you might have to start looking at that. Are there places there must be some variation in this story. There must be places that are more well-run compared to others, you would think.
Not that we have seen and not based on the emails that are coming in by the hour. No. No, this problem is replicating itself. The numbers are replicating themselves. That 37%, it's really interesting. So we've had information come in, but the delta between what we're saying in Denton Independent School District is, so our numbers are 37% of the population are going to go bankrupt and or they're going to lose the roof over their head. It's just the way the math is. Well, we started looking at other areas, and there's even a chart that I sent you that does a comparison between different districts in Texas. Well, what's so fascinating is that 37% may be 35%, it may be 39%. So up or down 2% one way or the other, but the same story is repeating itself, not just across Texas. We pulled the numbers from Ohio, from where this guy is. He was 36.3% based on their median household income. So no, the numbers keep repeating themselves. It may be a mathematical issue in that the fraud is so systemic. Because it's systemic, that may be why those percentages are literally starting to repeat themselves. They can't get around it. When you cheat the system the way they're cheating it, the cheating is the same. If the cheating is the same, the only variable is the median household income. That's why these percentages are starting to show it's the same.
How does this begin to map into, maybe it doesn't, but the larger sort of sweep of this campaign cycle here in late summer of 2024? We're seeing the sort of the tax the rich. The amount of federal tax increases is astonishing, right? Capital gains being proposed to more than double, eliminating 1031, the depletion and allowance in oil and gas, et cetera. I mean, they're really looking to like club things at that level. Sounds like we're going to have to get squeezed at the local level too for this to begin to even remotely pencil out. How do you see this playing out?
Well, okay, so the people that are taking those positions are nothing more than parrots without the benefit of intellect. If anybody adheres to what they're trying to do, we will end up in a greater depression, and because we've actually penciled it out. So you'll end up with 35% unemployment versus the 25% unemployment. The idea that, well, we're going to tax the rich, let me tell you something. The billionaires that have a staff, let's just say for the sake of conversation, a billionaire's got a staff of 400 people. If 200 of those people show up and say, I can't pay my real estate tax, give me money, okay, it's complete nonsense. This is going to affect everybody. So gimme, that game's over. Your site, Peak Prosperity, the name couldn't be any better, right? You literally have parabolic moves up in both directions. You got it on the federal level, and you got it on the local level. The local level is the state level. There is a fix. My fear is that the market gets in front of everybody. So the market being the bonds, when the bondholders find out, oh shit, we're not going to get our money back. We've got a huge problem here. Why? Because the people that raise those bonds, let's say it's Morgan Stanley. Morgan Stanley gets 2 and 20. They don't really have any skin in the game. Who are the bondholders? It's the pensioners. Who are the pensioners? Mom and pop. Not only are they going to get screwed on their mortgage, not only are they going to lose their house, they're going to lose their pension. And that's why I said, stop this, because you are going to create a civil war. You are going to have dead people over this. You're going to make people desperate. Knock it off. Stop all this idea, well, we're going to tax this and we're going to tax that, because there isn't a stitch of truth to back them up. All you have to do is look at your chart and look at my chart locally that are parabolic. Where are you going to get the money from? And if you can't answer the question, then you got to reverse course, and hard and fast. It'll be painful. But if everybody got on board with a unified sales tax, stop the real estate tax, give mom and pop the ability in 30 years to own that asset. You've given them a balance sheet. Why are you, the government, the only entity on the planet that are entitled to a balance sheet, and you idiots can't even adhere to it? Right? After we got off the gold standard, you couldn't adhere to it. So the point of the matter is, you've got to restore the power to mom and pop, because mom and pop is the economic engine. You destroy that economic engine, you're so stupid, you're destroying your friends, you're destroying your family, and you're destroying your own pocketbook. It has to stop, and it's got to stop fast and now. And all this crap you're hearing coming from people, oh no, we'll just tax everybody. There's not a stitch of truth in it. You can't. The money isn't there to do it. Oh,
agreed.
Even if they said, well, we'll just print more money. Okay, great. You got the Weimar Republic. Good luck to you.
Well, that's, yeah. And by the way, thanks for the little plug, Peak Prosperity. I named that very carefully because, we all want to hit our peak physical condition. Makes that. But actually, it's going to be a peak of prosperity if we don't get smart. And by the way, Mitch, I put that was a 2008 title. I thought we were going to get smarter I never thought I was going to see a chart that looks like this, right? This is just federal debt, right? 220 years to rack up the first 11 trillion in federal debt. And it was just 4 years for the next 11 trillion. It's just like, and so the question becomes, like, how do you fix this? And again, this is a fractal story. Here it is kind of at a large level. We dial in, but you're saying you can find similar charts that look just like this, same thing, parabolic at the municipal local level. And the deal is that if the federal government did try to, get this line to go flat for a little while, that's 6.6% of GDP. That would translate into probably 25-30% unemployment, all on its own, if the federal government wasn't allowed to deficit spend. But it's now deficit spending at a rate that's far faster than the GDP. And then people are all confused and like, well, Kamala, what are you going to do about inflation? And she says, oh, that's because milk's going up in price. Right? It's like, no, it's that's the symptom. The cause is this. There it is. I found your inflation. It's right there.
Well,
yeah.
The way to look at that, the nexus between these two parabolic charts is something called the Rule of 72. And the Rule of 72 says that basically, depending on the interest rate, your debt is going to double every 5 to 7 years, just depending on the rate of the interest. That's the nexus between them. That's why these charts are identical, because the debt is literally doubling. Like when you just go back to Louisville Independent School District 3 years ago, 2 7/8 on the cost of capital versus 7 7/8. Okay, that's 300% up in 3 years on the cost of interest. And you're so smart because you paid off the bonds? Oh, no. We don't pay off the bonds. We just roll them up. We just keep going. Bankrupt them. Let them go. Put them into Chapter 9. They're insolvent anyway. Let the parents get involved and take over the schools. And then you turn the schools into a fee process so that people are literally being paid and you can see it. You can see what's going on. You can't see what's going on in I kid you not, this is a spaghetti bowl of bonds. We have different interest rates. We have different timelines to pay off. We have different amounts. We have bonds on roofs, bonds on grass, bonds on parking lots, bonds on buildings, bonds on stadiums. It's a spaghetti bowl. You would need a team of forensic accountants months to figure out what the hell's going on here. This is just one school district. Well, the point of the matter is, let's not waste the time. You're already bankrupt because we already know in Tarrant Appraisal District, you've got your hands out and you say you cannot stop. You cannot freeze. You must keep increasing. You're bankrupt. Let's just kill it and get it over with. Return the power to mom and pop, wipe out these real estate taxes, and put in a uniform sales tax across the states, and the bite won't be that bad. Now, flip side of the coin is you have to mandate that the government stop spending, right? Bring it down, bring it down, bring it down. But that's how you stop the market from getting in front of it. If the market gets in front of all this, we will have a greater depression. That's what the math says.
Yeah, I completely agree. And by the way, Mitch, thanks for bringing up the Rule of 72, one of my favorite rules out there in life. It helps explain a lot. So for anybody who doesn't know, if I want to answer the question, how long before something doubles? And I know like my town says, oh, we have a 5% growth plan, sounds modest, sounds 5%. Like I don't get out of bed to go to a store because there's 5% off on jeans, So what does that mean? But you divide 5 into 72 and you come up with a number like 14. And it's basically my town saying, well, we want to double every 14 years. So twice as many schools, twice as many, sewage treatment. There's it's an astonishing thing. 5% turns into a complete doubling in 14 years. That's what the Rule of 72 does. It allows you to see that even small percentage deviations under that compounding formula, wow, they stack up quick. They really do, and I think too few people understand that. But now we're about to all experience it, so maybe we'll have a embodied understanding of it going forward. I don't know.
Well, there's 23,000 people at the Federal Reserve, and I am a proponent for chaining the doors because the data inputs, they move the goalposts, but the data inputs on the numbers that they use aren't even the real data. So you've got a series of steps in here that are completely mismanaged. So they have what's called the Mulholland-Obis formula. And it was created, I think, in the 1920s, 1927, somewhere in there. And it's a really good mathematical formula. But it's dependent on actual numbers that are verifiable for the inputs. Well, when you see what they're doing in the press and the market manipulation, then the people inside the Fed pick that up and they regurgitate it back into their own formulas that aren't even accurate. You've got multiple levels here of inaccuracy. So what we've done, which coincidentally is a requirement in law, standard deviation is by far the best way to pull these CADs apart. Why? Because inside of Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice is the requirement for standard deviation. Standard deviation is also required under the Texas Property Tax Code. That tells the truth because you can run standard deviation across every single line item of an income and expense statement should you choose. You can run standard deviation for a group of houses inside of your subdivision, which we have done. We literally built the system that we know their software is supposed to be doing. They just don't care. And they choose to use comps that aren't real comps. So standard deviation would help people if they understood how to do it massively, because as long as you've got real inputs, you're good.
Yep. Now that was, I really enjoyed that you included it. One of these documents you sent me, each one of those as an individual PDF, was a very nice reminder on how standard deviation is calculated, and walked through the steps. So, Mitch, where can people find those documents? Question one. Question two, you say you're getting emails. Do you really want emails? Because if you put an email out here, you're going to get flooded. And so if the answer is yes, I need to know, let's help. What should people put in the subject line? You know, if you have whistleblower or, anecdote or case study like that 84-year-old gentleman in Ohio, tell me what kind of emails would be helpful to you, and we'll see if we can help rally some more activity for you here.
So what we're doing, the website is mockingbirdproperties.com/DCAD. On that landing page, you will see a series of videos. You will also see a link to a petition. And it's the petition that people are, when they send an email, they're actually saying, we want you to know about this, and they're able to put it inside the petition. And there's been quite a few that have kind of gone back to the front page of Mockingbird Properties and to reach out to me, which is fine. So yeah, but we're okay. But that website, mockingbirdproperties.com/DCAD, has got a mountain of data on the landing page, including the petition. If somebody wants access, such as your attorneys, to the backside to understand how this math really works, we have gigabytes of data on the backside. And for the attorneys and the accountants, we'll open that up for them. It's got a private passcode, but it's readily available, no problem. We're happy to share it. If they get to the point where they start, because we actually have somebody in Florida working on constitutional lawsuits there now. So if those people had reached out to my attorney to find out from the horse's mouth as to where it was. So they're replicating exactly what we've done. We've done all the heavy lifting. All of our documents are there, our spreadsheets are there, how we did it, readily available. You just have to take it to your particular jurisdiction, duplicate our formulas, right? And insert your own information and you're good.
And one more time, there was a gentleman named Spencer, you said, who's working through a process for this. What was that name again? Travis Spencer, I think you said?
Travis Spencer. His YouTube is Real Estate Mindset. And he's announcing now, like, he released 40% of it yesterday for those people who said, I just want to start. And these are clips, 1 or 2 minute clips to walk people through what is a property tax, how is it assessed against your property. But by the time this is all done, which should be within the next 10 days, 10 days to 2 weeks, it'll give you how to do a comparison. And you will end up knowing more when you've done this series, this little course. And it's free. There's no charge on any of this. Nobody here is making 10 cents. I'm not making 10 cents. Travis isn't making nothing. It's all free. So by the time you're done that course, you will end up knowing more than the CADs themselves. You will know more than the chief appraiser. And you'll be doing it legitimately based on what the law says.
Excellent. And if you could put a wish out, what kind of resources do you need? I mean, I have a pretty big audience, so lawyers, what would be helpful to you here as we go forward?
Okay, because you asked, and I'm thankful that you did. Here's the reality: we're at a time in our nation where serious minds have got to get together to fix this. If you could imagine President Trump standing on a stage and saying, we now have evidence of this problem. The solution is that the real estate taxes have to be eliminated in favor of a uniform sales tax. Drop the mic and walk off. Because this is a nonpartisan issue. There's 144 million single-family homeowners in the United States. I don't care what side of the table you're on, this is touching you. The only question is, do you want to recognize it and get involved and fix it, or do you want to bury your head in the sand? But this idea, when somebody stands up and says, well, we're just going to tax everybody and tax the rich, the statement isn't true. The money isn't there to do it. It's a straight-up lie. What we have here is purely nonpartisan. And can you imagine the amount of people, when they heard that, will say, wait a minute, this is touching my life, my family, my friends. Why wouldn't I vote to eliminate the real estate taxes? And that's what it's got to be. I mean, Denton Central Appraisal District is ground zero, but the evidence is straight across the United States. And nobody can, in all this time, I've been challenging people. If you can find anything wrong, I'm happy to remove the document, and I'll apologize. The truth is, they can't. And even if they could find a paragraph that was wrong, no problem. I still got 1,100 documents to go. It isn't going to change the story. It isn't going to change how this affects everybody's life that's out there. And every single real estate property owner is getting screwed by this. It doesn't matter if you're commercial, single family, multifamily. If you're a multifamily tenant, how much of your rent goes into paying the taxes? The answer is 38%. Yeah, it's
Whoa.
Crazy. So it touches everybody. And that's why it's got to be eliminated. And a uniform sales tax will not be that bad, because all those states have different criteria. Because it's uniformly applied. Well, we'll tax gas, we'll tax groceries, et cetera, et cetera. Even that, even if somebody says, well, if you have a tax, if somebody goes to a grocery store and they're at a low income level, that's no problem. Give them back the money off the IRS taxes. That's not an issue. It can be dealt with. The trick here is to take something that has purely been made 100% subjective and turn it into something that is purely objective. And the infrastructure to make it objective is the sales tax. It exists. We just have to make a few little tweaks, and this problem it'll be painful, but this problem for the most part will fix itself.
I'm getting a little excited here because one of the things, if I could wave my magic wand, it would be, hey, can we just do away with, there's so many useless jobs in government, a lot of parasites, people who just have jobs because you need the jobs to administrate the rules that require somebody to be there to administrate the rules. I mean, it just feels, it's just sand in the transmission. And I know this because I'm a businessman. And I know this because I've seen how other countries do it. We put huge barriers to getting prosperity going in this country, which is small and medium-sized enterprises. I mean, there's the permits and the fees, and there's the thises and the that's, and there's a lot of stuff. I guarantee you, Mitch, if it went away, nobody would notice, except we would have more prosperity, which is actually what I would like to see more of. So if there's a way to skinny government down in this overall process, maybe begin to have the hard conversation, like, do we really need one of those? I don't think we need one of everything we got going on right now.
I don't think anybody should be in government that can't balance a checkbook. First criteria.
That would be one, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe that hasn't actually been successful in operating a business before you start regulating a business, if you're in that line of government, right? Maybe you should have
absolutely. I mean, you've got to prove yourself. Yeah, and this is a time, we're out of time here. I mean, your chart shows it, my charts show it. We're out of time.
Mm-hmm.
There's no time to monkeying around. And then even the VP yesterday was on, somebody came and told me that, well, she wants to get 25,000 jobs, new business permits. Okay, I got one question. How are you going to do that? You've been stealing money nonstop. How are you going to do that? See, the point is you can't fall for the lines. You've got to look at the math and understand what's happening. And you don't have any further to look than your own house. Just go and look at your tax statement on your house. That'll tell you what's going on. You know that your house is not worth that type of money. You know you can't sell it for that type of money.
Mm-hmm.
What's the number? 30% less, 40% less, depending on your jurisdiction. But that tells you how much theft has been stolen from you. Over and above that, so look at it this way. If you took $2,400 a year, just for the sake of conversation, that you didn't have to pay, which is $100,000 in overvaluation, and every year and every month you took $200 a month, and you put it in an index fund for the next 30 years, do you know when you go to retire, you're pretty close to $1 million? Just on that alone. Just on the savings, just by eliminating that one step of fraud. Then, because you own the asset, you own the land under your feet, right? When the taxes are eliminated, you own that asset. Well, in 30 years, because of the principal reduction of your mortgage, or 25 years or 20 years, depending what your amortization is, you own that asset. So now you've got $1 million in cash over here, and you got a 300 or 400 or 500,000 or 600,000, whatever it's worth in 30 years over here. You don't need a pension fund. And your pension fund, if we hit a greater depression, you can kiss that goodbye. System is inverted and perverted. But the reality is there's a way out of it to fix this rolling forward.
Starts with education. We got to wake people up. So Mitch Wechsler of Mockingbird Properties, that was mockingbirdproperties.com/DCAD, if I had that right.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you so much for doing this. Thank you for your time today. Great to meet you. And I trust that we're going to continue to be in contact, become good friends over time. By the way, for anybody listening, I often end my my episodes with a very cryptic plant a garden, because I think you're going to need one. Mitch and his wife have extensive gardens and gardening, just to put a little context on that. So that will resonate with my audience for sure. So thanks very much, Mitch. Appreciate your time today and appreciate what you're doing.
Great. Thank you for inviting me, and I'm truly honored to have been here. Thank you.